She thought it was just one night. No names. No future. But 3 weeks later, he walked into her office, wearing a suit, holding her promotion, and carrying a secret that could destroy them both. The night had started like a dare, one she hadn't meant to accept, but couldn't resist. Talia Wynn was not the kind of woman who did reckless things. She built her life in spreadsheets and boundaries. She chose almond milk over whiskey, stayed late at the office instead of going out, and always chose logic over longing. But that night, New York shimmered like something out of a dream, and her best friend had shoved a red dress into her hands with the kind of grin that came before disaster. "You need one night to remember what it feels like to be wanted," Kira said. And so she went. One drink turned into two. Jazz curled through the rooftop bar, smoky and smooth. Talia leaned against the railing, letting the skyline blur when she felt it, the weight of someone watching her. He was across the room, tall, broad shoulders beneath a black open-collar shirt. No tie, no drink, just eyes the color of a fading storm. He didn't approach fast. He didn't leer. He waited. When he finally moved, it was with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Is that seat taken?" he asked, voice low, warm, and deeply dangerous. She should have shut it down, politely declined. But something in her, some small, aching rebellion, answered instead. "It is now." The rest blurred, the way memory does when it's wrapped in risk and whispered confessions. They talked about cities that changed them, about heartbreaks they never got over, about silence, and how sometimes it speaks louder than words. They didn't trade last names. They didn't ask for futures. They ended up in a penthouse suite overlooking the East River, the kind of place that didn't come with guilt, just clean white sheets and anonymity. He kissed her like he'd already memorized her. And when she woke the next morning, sunlight bleeding through silk curtains, he was gone. No note, no phone number, no explanation. Just a memory, haunting, sweet, and irreversible. She told herself it was fine. One night, no ties, no strings, until 3 weeks later, until the promotion, until the company-wide email lit up her screen with 9 words that split her reality clean in half. "Please welcome our new CEO, Mr. Damon Voss." And there he was, walking into the main conference hall with all the quiet dominance of a man who knew his power. Crisp charcoal suit, that same dark gaze. And the worst part? He didn't flinch when he saw her. Didn't smirk. Didn't hesitate. Just passed her like she was background noise. Talia froze in her seat. Her hands gripped the sides of her chair as the room shifted around her. He moved like a king in his own court, executives orbiting him, interns whispering, and yet nothing, like she didn't exist. Or worse, like she was forgettable. Her team lead, Donovan, leaned toward her. "They say he built an AI empire in Singapore. Speaks 5 languages. Keeps to himself." She didn't reply. She couldn't. She remembered everything. The way he touched her like she mattered. The way he stared at her like she was more than just a body in a bar. And now, he walked past her like she never happened. She barely heard a word of the company roadmap. Her thoughts spun in loops of confusion and heat. Because if Damon remembered and was pretending, that stung. But if he genuinely didn't, that would destroy her. What she didn't know, what no one in that room could have guessed, was that Damon Voss remembered everything. And the reason he said nothing was because he was already breaking rules just by looking at her. Talia didn't remember how she made it back to her desk. Her legs moved, her hands went through the motions of typing, but her brain was caught in a loop. His face, his voice, the ice-cold way he'd walked past her like she was no one. Damon Voss had looked directly at her in that conference room, and he hadn't blinked. No smile, no flicker of tension, no indication that he'd ever seen her before in his life. The memory of his mouth on her skin came rushing back without warning, his hand slipping down her spine. The sound of his breath when he whispered her name like it was his last confession. And now he was her CEO, and he'd made her invisible. Around her, co-workers were buzzing like they'd all just been pulled into orbit. Conversations floated above her head, praise, shock, curiosity about the man who had just taken the reins of the company with the silent force of a tidal wave. "He used to run a defense AI firm in Singapore, didn't he?" Someone whispered. "I heard he lives off-grid half the year. Guy's a ghost. Did you see how fast he shut down the old Q4 plan? Cold. But damn, he's brilliant." She stared at her screen, numbers blurring, trying to act like she hadn't just spent the morning suffocating in unspoken history. Her manager, Donovan, tapped the side of her cubicle with a grin. "Got a minute?" "Sure," she said without looking up. "You've been picked for the internal stakeholder briefing next week. You'll present the Q2 projections." Talia's head snapped up. "What?" "Damon requested you," Donovan said. "Apparently, your reporting models from last quarter stood out. He said your metrics were clean, adaptive, and strategically relevant." He gave her a half laugh. No pressure or anything. Her throat tightened. Damon had requested her? After pretending she didn't exist, now he wanted her in front of senior executives, dissecting projections with him in the same room? "Okay," she said after a pause. "I'll do it." Donovan raised a brow. "Didn't expect you to say yes so fast." "You good?" "Yeah, just focused." When he walked away, her composure cracked. Why her? Why acknowledge her work but not her? She stayed late, long after the others had gone, the office lights dimming around her. Outside the window, the skyline twinkled beneath the slow roll of dusk. She opened her email, intending to finish a dataset she'd started earlier, but another message slid into her inbox, this one with no fanfare. Sender, devos@solvexincorporated.com. Subject, private meeting. Message. Tuesday, 9:30 p.m., 739 Easton Tower. Private entrance. Top floor. No staff. No files. No questions. DV. Her pulse stuttered. She didn't need to read it twice. 739 Easton Tower wasn't just a luxury high-rise. It was the building. The same one from 3 months ago. The suite with the white sheets, the skyline view, the red dress she'd never wear again. No apology. No explanation. Just a time. A place. A command. Talia stared at the screen. Her mind shouted every reasonable thing she should do. Ignore it, report it, block him. But her fingers hovered. And without thinking, without breathing, she replied. Understood. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling as her heart tried to slow. What was Damon playing at? What kind of game started with silence and followed with a summons? This wasn't about a one-night mistake. It wasn't even about revenge. This was about control. And for reasons she couldn't understand, couldn't admit even to herself, she still wanted to hear his voice again, even if it shattered her a second time. Talia didn't tell anyone where she was going that night. Not Kira. Not Donovan. Not her own reflection. She just stepped into the black car that pulled up exactly at 9:05 and let herself be carried into the part of Manhattan that didn't believe in rules for people like her. The kind of place where penthouses didn't have numbers, just names whispered in mergers and NDAs. 739 Easton Tower loomed like a monument to power. As the elevator climbed in silence, she could feel the tight rhythm of her breath in her chest, every second passing like a held note. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world that smelled like leather, salt air, and him. It was the same suite. Not similar. The same. Same sprawling windows with city lights spilling in like a promise. Same curved glass bar in the corner. Same balcony doors barely cracked to let in the sound of New York's pulse. She could still remember how his hands had slid around her waist in that kitchen, his voice a whisper against her neck. And there he was. Damon stood with his back to her, his jacket draped across the arm of a white couch, the sleeves of his dress shirt rolled up, veins like tension lines against his forearms. He didn't turn when she entered. "You came," he said. She closed the door behind her, careful not to let it slam. "You sent an order, not an invitation." He finally turned, and the sight of his face undid her all over again. No boardroom distance. No corporate mask. Just Damon, the man who once stared at her like she was the only real thing in a world made of noise. But this wasn't the man who left her in the morning. This man looked tired. Tied around the eyes. Like he'd been carrying something too long. "You've had 3 weeks to speak to me," she said, her voice low. 3 weeks of meetings, of passing me in hallways like I was part of the furniture. So why now? Damon's eyes didn't flinch. "Because I couldn't risk saying the wrong thing in the wrong room." "So you wait until after hours? Until you're in control again?" "Just like before." He moved closer, slow, careful. "This isn't about control." "No? Because it sure as hell feels like you're still pulling the strings. First you disappear. Then you show up as my boss and act like I don't exist. Now this." "I left that morning," he said, "because I got a call 5 minutes after you fell asleep. A security breach. At my previous firm. A partner I trusted tried to steal proprietary code worth 8 figures and vanish overseas. I had to stop it before it hit public markets." Talia narrowed her eyes. And you couldn't leave a note? I was trying to protect you. He said it so simply, as if it should have solved everything. She laughed, but it was bitter. You think silence protects people? You think pretending you never met me was noble? I didn't plan any of this. When I saw you in that boardroom, I almost walked back out. But if I'd shown any reaction, someone in that room would have noticed. I couldn't risk anyone making connections between us. Why? He hesitated. And in that pause, she saw it, the thing he hadn't said. The secret he'd been holding. There's more, she whispered. Damon looked down, then back at her. 6 months ago, before I ever met you, you were flagged by someone inside my old company. Not because of you, because of your proximity to a project I was working on. My name wasn't attached, but the code I wrote was. You were a risk to someone. She went still. A risk? What are you talking about? They thought you were bait. A plant. Bet someone sent you to get close to me. Talia's chest rose and fell too fast. Is that what you think? No. But the moment I realized who you were, who you worked for, I knew they'd find a way to spin it. And now, I'm here, and you're under me in the reporting structure. If anything between us leaks, it won't just be awkward. It could cost you your career. Silence fell like a curtain. Outside, the city kept moving. But inside the suite, the truth settled into the space between them like a storm that had always been waiting to break. So why call me here? She asked softly. Damon walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of scotch. Set one in front of her. Because I've spent weeks trying to forget that night. Trying to do the responsible thing. But every time I see you in the hallway, hear your voice in a meeting, I remember everything. She stared at the glass, then at him. And finally, she whispered, I didn't forget either. He took a step closer. Not hungry, not dominant, just honest. I want to protect you, Talia, he said, but I don't think I can stay away from you. Her heartbeat betrayed her first, then her breath, then the way her hand didn't reach for the door, because she knew what came next. And she wasn't ready to walk away either. The tension in the penthouse had shifted. Not explosive, not seductive, just dense, like the air before lightning splits the sky. Talia stood still, a glass of untouched scotch in her hand. Her eyes locked on Damon's as if they could pull meaning from everything he wasn't saying. You can't stay away from me, she repeated, her voice quieter now. Then why pretend you already had? He exhaled through his nose, jaw tightening as he leaned back against the marble island. Because I've seen what happens when I get involved with people outside the boardroom. People get used, watched, blamed. It's not fair, especially not to you. Her fingers brushed the crystal rim of the glass, eyes never leaving his. Then why bring me here tonight? Because I couldn't take it anymore. He said it simply. No apology, no drama, just truth. They stood in silence, the city breathing outside the windows, lights blinking like distant stars. It should have been romantic. It wasn't. It was heavier than that, intimate, uncomfortable, undeniable. You don't get to decide what's fair for me, Talia finally said, setting the glass down. I deserved a choice. About whether I wanted to be part of this or not. About whether that night meant anything or not. His gaze dropped to the floor, then back to her. It meant something. Then you shouldn't have acted like I didn't. I didn't know how to look at you and not risk everything. Her chest tightened. You mean your career? I mean you, Damon snapped, sharper than he intended. His hands braced against the counter like they were the only thing holding him back from unraveling. You have no idea how fast people like me can ruin people like you, quietly, without even meaning to. I wanted to spare you that. She moved closer. Not much, just enough that the scent of his cologne found her. That memory lived in her blood now, cedar, salt, and sin. Then let me say this for the record. I didn't come here to be spared. I came here because you made me feel something that hasn't gone away, even when I wanted it to. Damon looked at her like she'd just punched a hole through the wall he'd spent years building. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. His thumb lingered just long enough to break her down inside. I haven't stopped thinking about you, he admitted. Even when I had to act like you didn't exist. Especially then. Talia's breath hitched, eyes searching his. So what now? He didn't answer with words. He leaned in slow, intentional, eyes locked on hers as if waiting for her to stop him. She didn't. His lips found hers like a secret long buried. The kiss wasn't desperate. It was steady, certain, restrained in the way only something deeply wanted can be. Her hands rose instinctively, gripping the collar of his shirt as if to confirm he was real. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. This is insane. Completely, he said. You're my boss. I noticed. I should go. You should. Neither of them moved. Instead, Damon turned and walked toward the bedroom, stopping just outside the doorway. There's a guest room. Second door on the right. Clean linens, full privacy. Talia looked at him, confused. You're not here to sleep with me, he said. Not unless you want to. You're here because you deserve the truth. And that comes in the morning. She stared at him, searching his face for any trace of manipulation. There was none. Just honesty and restraint. Good night, Talia, he said. And then he disappeared into his own room without looking back. For a long moment, she stood there, breath caught in her throat, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or scream. In the end, she walked down the hall. Not toward the exit. Not toward his door. But toward the room he'd given her. A safe distance. For now. Because tomorrow, the truth would change everything. Talia barely slept. She tried. She lay beneath the soft linen sheets of the guest room, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the low hum of the city through thick glass. The scent of them still lingered in the air, leather, warm spice, memory. It settled into her skin like smoke. She replayed the night in loops. The words, the restraint, the kiss. Not heat-driven or impulsive, but something more dangerous. Deliberate. It would have been easier if he had pulled her into that bedroom and erased everything with desire. But no, Damon Voss had chosen distance. And in that distance, she saw the man beneath the CEO. Not the storm. The silence behind it. She got up early, dressed in yesterday's clothes, and made her way to the kitchen barefoot, hoping he'd still be asleep. But there he was at the island, in a t-shirt and sweats, dark hair damp from the shower, pouring black coffee into 2 mugs. Morning, he said like they hadn't cracked something irreversible last night. Morning, she replied, more wary than warm. He slid 1 mug toward her. I know you have questions. I have more than questions. I have whiplash. He smirked at that, the corner of his mouth twitching. But it didn't last. He turned serious almost instantly. There's something I want you to see. Something I should have shown you the moment I knew who you were. Talia stiffened. Who I was? Not like that, he said quickly. I mean, what your job connects you to. There's a file. An internal one. It has nothing to do with you personally, but it explains why I had to keep my distance. He walked into the study and returned with a thin black folder. No logo. No name. She hesitated before opening it. The first page was a memo. Internal flag. Solvex Division Art 9. Subject. Windata Group. Analytics Subsidiary. Flag Personnel. Talia Wynn. Data Systems Analyst 3. She frowned, scanning faster. Someone had flagged her because her analytics pipeline was brushing too close to sensitive development logs, logs tied to Damon's previous company before it was acquired. She hadn't even known. She'd just been optimizing report speed. She was one of 100 analysts doing cleanup on legacy code. But someone at the top had noticed. I never saw this until after that night, he said. But the moment I did, I realized how it would look. If we were connected. If anyone thought I'd planted you to bury my tracks or cover liabilities from the acquisition. I was just doing my job, she snapped. I know. But perception moves faster than truth in our world. She stared at the pages. Meeting summaries. Time-stamped reviews of her work. Even transcripts of Slack threads she didn't remember typing. All of it compiled like she was a threat. You said you wanted to protect me, she whispered. I didn't realize you meant from your own board. Not mine, he said carefully. Not anymore. But someone on the inside wanted to use you. Or discredit you. And if I'd so much as looked at you too long during that first week, this would have ended very differently. Talia felt like the floor shifted under her. She wasn't just collateral. She'd been bait. You should have told me, she said, eyes flashing. I had a right to know. I know. That's why you're here now. He handed her 1 more page. His resignation letter, dated 2 days before the board voted him CEO. I wasn't supposed to stay, Damon said. But when the offer came, I knew if I turned it down, they'd bring someone in who'd bury this. You'd never know. The data would disappear. But if I stayed, I could protect it. Protect you. Talia folded the paper slowly. So you became my boss to keep me safe. And to fix what I helped build, he added. But I didn't expect you to still be under my skin. The silence between them stretched. This time, it wasn't tense. It was heavy with the weight of what couldn't be undone. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted. With any of it. You don't have to decide right now. Talia looked at him. Not the man who vanished after one night. Not the executive who tore through quarterly plans with precision. She saw him now. Damon Voss, the man who had traded power for protection, distance for proximity. The man who had watched her from a corner office while pretending not to feel a thing. And the worst part? She still felt everything. You should go, he said softly. Take the day. Think. She didn't reply. She grabbed the folder and walked toward the elevator. But just before the doors closed, she turned. You say you did this to protect me, she said. But if that's true, then you need to trust me too. With all of it. Damon nodded once, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of exposure. Fear of losing her. And somehow, that terrified her more than anything else. The next morning, Talia didn't go to the office. She didn't check her email, didn't answer Donovan's texts, and didn't bother to brush her hair until the sun had already moved halfway across the sky. She spent most of the day with that black folder on the kitchen counter, flipping through the pages like they might suddenly make sense if she just read them enough times. But the more she read, the colder she felt, because the truth was clear now. Her name had been marked, not as a mistake, not as a random bystander, as leverage. Someone, high up, smart, strategic, had identified her position, her department, her access to the right data threads, and they'd waited for the right move, waited for Damon Voss to either flinch or fall. Only he didn't. He took the company's highest office instead, and he kept her at a distance not out of cruelty, but to contain the damage someone else was trying to orchestrate. Still, that didn't make the silence hurt any less. By midday, Talia had made a decision. She showered, changed, and packed the folder into a plain black envelope. If they wanted her scared, confused, and compromised, they picked the wrong woman. She wasn't going to wait for Damon to clean up a mess someone else made around her name. She was going to force a conversation. But when she arrived at the Solvex building, the lobby was already chaos. Security at the front desk. Executives whispering near the elevators. Assistants moving faster than usual, voices hushed and urgent. Something had shifted. She didn't even make it to her floor before her phone buzzed. Donovan, did you see the leak? They're saying someone inside rigged the analytics pipeline for insider advantage. Your name is on a list, Talia. You okay? Her blood ran cold. She pressed deeper into the elevator corner, thumb flying over her screen. Talia, what leak? What list? Donovan, someone posted docs to the dark web. Internal comms, flagged employees, you name it. It's trending internally. They're doing damage control. The elevator doors opened on her floor. Half the team had their phones out. Screens flashed with anonymous forum posts, screenshots of internal tags, messages scraped from company Slack archives. Her name was there. In bold. Talia Wynn. Internal monitor status, elevated. Review pending. She stared at the screen, her body numb. But before panic could settle in, a voice cut through the noise. Wynn, come with me. Damon. He stood in the hallway, unshaven, sleeves rolled, phone still in hand, eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. She followed him wordlessly through the glass doors, past stunned employees who now looked at her like she was radioactive. They stepped into his office, and he closed the door. Someone pulled the pin, he said before she could speak. The files I gave you, they were encrypted. That version was offline. Air-gapped. Someone else had access. You think I leaked them? Her voice cracked with disbelief. No, he stepped closer, face hard with fury. I think someone wanted it to look like we did, that we had something to hide. And now that our connection is in the open, you're the easiest person to discredit. Talia's hands curled into fists. And you still think staying quiet was the right move? I was trying to protect you. Well, congratulations, she snapped. Now everyone thinks I'm your mistress and a corporate mole. Damon turned away, pressing his palms to the glass wall. His reflection looked like a man under siege. I'm pulling the logs, he said. Tracing the breach. I don't care who at the board is behind this. Once I find it, I'll bury them. Talia dropped the envelope on his desk. You won't have to. He looked at her. I've already traced it. He blinked. You what? She straightened her spine. You're not the only one who knows how to pull access strings and flag packet movements. I traced the leak back to a secure keychain hidden under a legacy profile. HR division. Executive layer. Damon's eyes narrowed. Someone on the board. Specifically. She paused. Your acting CFO. Claridge. Silence. And then he laughed. Cold. Broken. A sound that held more betrayal than amusement. She always did say I had a blind spot for analysts. I'm not your blind spot, Damon, she said evenly. I'm your warning shot. He looked at her then, truly looked at her. Not as the woman who shook his walls in a hotel room. Not as the analyst buried in quarterly reports. But as the one person who didn't just stand beside him. She outmaneuvered the ones who came for his throat. "Talia," he said slowly, "this changes everything." She nodded. "Yes, it does." Because she wasn't just a target anymore. She was holding the match, and the whole boardroom was soaked in gasoline. They didn't meet in the office. Not this time. Too many eyes. Too many whispers. They met beneath it, in the city's undercurrent, at a quiet table in a restaurant without a sign. A place built for deals that never made the press, where fortunes changed hands over silence and imported scotch. There were no windows, no servers unless summoned, and no need for menus. You came here when you already knew what you wanted. Talia arrived first. All black. No jewelry. No pretense. Her presence cut through the low light with quiet intensity. She wasn't trying to make a statement. She was the statement. Everything about her, hair pulled back, spine perfectly straight, envelope tucked under one arm, said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." Damon arrived 2 minutes later. No tie. Sleeves rolled. The weight of the last 24 hours clinging to his shoulders like a storm he hadn't outrun. They didn't shake hands. They didn't pretend this was social. "Thank you for coming," he said as he sat. She raised an eyebrow. "Don't thank me. I'm not here as a favor. I'm here because they're coming for both of us. And I don't plan on going down for something I didn't start." He nodded once, then leaned forward. "You're sure it was Claridge?" "I traced the breach myself," Talia said, sliding a flash drive across the table. 3 sessions. Ghost protocol. Old admin key that was deactivated the day after she used it. The timing wasn't coincidence. She wanted the file planted to make it look like you were covering for me. Damon's jaw clenched. "Which gives the board the perfect excuse to launch a no-confidence vote. And throw us both under the bus," she added. "You for conflict of interest. Me for insider manipulation." He looked at her, a faint crack in his composure. "And the press. 2 anonymous tips already scheduled for delivery tomorrow morning," Talia said. "Both hint at a romantic relationship, leaked files, and corporate corruption. She's not just coming for your title, Damon. She's coming for your reputation." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "So she weaponized us." Talia didn't flinch. "No." She tried. The words settled. And in the silence, something shifted. He studied her face, this woman who, months ago, had been a stranger in a rooftop bar. Now, she was across from him in the darkest hour of his career, speaking not like a victim, but like someone holding the detonator. "She underestimated you," he said. "She still does." Talia leaned in, placing both palms flat on the table. "Listen carefully. I'm planting a red herring tonight, an IP echo trace to an assistant with just enough motive to cause chaos. Let the board chew on that while you file an injunction to freeze Claridge's voting rights. You'll need to move before the 10 a.m. session. I'll have the email logs transferred to your general counsel in an hour." Damon blinked. "You planned all that since this morning?" "No," she said. "I started planning it the moment you showed me the truth." He sat back, staring at her like he didn't know whether to laugh or propose. And then, his voice lower, almost reverent, he said, "You terrify me sometimes." "You should be terrified," she said, "because you're not the only one with influence anymore." "And what do you want, Talia? When this is over? When she's gone?" Her eyes didn't waver. "My name cleared. My silence respected. And when I walk into a room, I want every person who doubted me to know I was never a pawn." He smiled. But it wasn't amusement. It was admiration. The kind that only came when someone saw you for what you really were, not polished, not perfect, but powerful. "Then let's make sure they never forget your name." She stood first. No goodbye. No touch. Just movement. But just before she reached the exit, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. A message. From him. "Damon. Let them come. Let them rage. I built this empire once. But with you beside me, I'll burn it down and build it better." Talia didn't reply. Not because she didn't feel something, but because she didn't need to. The war had already begun. And this time, she wasn't standing behind anyone. She was walking straight into the fire, unafraid, unburned. And fully aware that when this was over, the world wouldn't ask what Damon Voss had done to protect her. It would ask how Talia Wynn had won. At 9:58 a.m., the executive board of Solvex Incorporated convened in a soundproof glass room on the 52nd floor. The city stretched endlessly beyond the windows, cold and metallic, unaware that a corporate coup was about to erupt inside this room, and that one woman no one saw coming was already rewriting the ending. Talia sat beside Damon at the long obsidian table, the only woman in a sea of polished suits and tightened jaws. Her black blazer was fitted, her posture perfect, and her expression unreadable. To anyone else, she looked like a subordinate seated beside her boss. Only Damon knew better. And soon, the rest of them would too. The CFO, Claridge, took her seat with barely disguised confidence. She didn't look at Talia. Didn't need to. The night before, her leak had gone public. 2 industry blogs had already picked up the story, and whispers were trickling through the finance world. Rumors of misconduct, a conflict of interest, data breaches tied to an analyst who'd gotten too close to the man at the top. But Claridge didn't just want Talia gone. She wanted Damon bleeding credibility. The meeting began with pleasantries no one believed. Then came the motion, a vote to remove Damon from his position pending an internal ethics review. Claridge presented it herself, voice calm, rehearsed, full of faux concern. "We owe it to our shareholders," she said smoothly. A CEO under suspicion, with clear personal entanglements and compromised security, it's not just risky. It's unacceptable. Damon didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, he looked at Talia. She nodded once. He slid a folder across the table. "Before we vote, I'd like to submit counter-evidence." A pause. Then a murmur. Claridge's eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to him. "You're not allowed to present new findings without prior." "The evidence isn't new," Talia interrupted, voice sharp, clean. "It's just been hidden." Every head turned. Claridge stared at her, finally seeing her not as an assistant in the shadows, but as something far more dangerous, a woman who wasn't afraid anymore. "This packet," Talia said, rising from her chair, "contains verified logs showing that CFO Helen Claridge used a legacy admin access key to breach encrypted systems and falsify access points tied to both myself and Mr. Voss. She framed us." "Lies," Claridge spat. "She's bluffing." "Am I?" Talia slid a second flash drive onto the table. "This drive holds the original IP trace, the security handshakes, and the Slack metadata logs. Timestamped. Verified. Authenticated this morning by our cybersecurity lead and a third-party consultant from Kessler Digital." One of the board members leaned forward, skeptical. "You're saying Ms. Claridge created the entire scandal to undermine the CEO's position?" Talia didn't flinch. "Not just his. Mine." A beat passed. Then another. Claridge laughed. "Too loud. Too forced. Do you honestly expect us to believe this, this analyst?" "Senior data systems strategist," Damon corrected. "As of this morning." Claridge's smile faded. Damon stood, adjusting his jacket slowly. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. "Miss Claridge didn't just compromise our internal systems. She compromised our integrity. If we vote on this motion today without reviewing the evidence, we're not protecting Solvex. We're handing it over to someone who weaponizes trust." The room fell still. The chairman cleared his throat. "I move to pause the vote pending a full internal review. Effective immediately, Ms. Claridge's board privileges are suspended. All files are to be handed over to compliance." Claridge stood, hands clenched. "You're making a mistake. All of you." Talia met her eyes. "No, you did." Security escorted Claridge out 2 minutes later. When the door shut behind her, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, eyes turned back to Talia. Damon remained standing beside her, a silent wall of support. But he didn't speak. He didn't need to. Talia spoke for herself now. And everyone in that room, from the oldest partner to the youngest executive, listened. She had walked in branded as a liability. She walked out as a threat. And by the time the meeting adjourned, every person who once whispered about her in hallways now knew. The woman Damon Voss once tried to protect had just saved his empire. Not by being quiet, by being seen. The storm had passed. Not with thunder, not with destruction, but with silence, the kind that only comes when something truly monumental has ended. Talia stood in the hallway outside Damon's office, her reflection ghosting across the glass. The building around her still pulsed with energy. Phones rang. Deals churned. Faces passed with polite nods and sidelong glances. But her world had gone still. She knew what waited inside. Not danger, not politics, just a man and a question. She stepped through the doors quietly. The office was darker than usual. No overheads, just the glow of the skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan was spread before them like a kingdom, cold, glittering, untouchable. But Damon Voss wasn't looking at it. He was standing near the window, blazer off, shirt unbuttoned at the throat, sleeves rolled high on his forearms. The man who once spoke in code and silence now looked raw, real. He turned when he heard the door close. His eyes found hers instantly. Not possessive, not guarded, just open. "You came," he said quietly. I had to. You didn't. She smiled, a soft, tired curve that carried weeks of battle. That's exactly why I did. Damon didn't move. Neither did she. They stood there like two people who'd seen each other across too many battlefields and finally reached the last one. I watched you today, he said after a pause. In that boardroom. You weren't the woman I met in that rooftop bar. No, she said. She was still trying to be liked. And who are you now? She walked closer, slow and measured, each step deliberate. Someone who knows exactly what she's worth. And who finally stopped apologizing for being impossible to ignore. Damon let out a low, broken breath. I tried to control it, you know. Us. I thought if I buried it, we'd both stay safe. But it kept bleeding through everything. The meetings. The hallway glances. The moments when I almost said your name just to feel it again. Talia stopped in front of him, close enough to see the way his breath faltered. You don't have to protect me anymore. I know, he said. You never really did. He nodded slowly, then reached for her hand. His grip was firm, steady, the same hand that once held the weight of a company, now wrapped around hers like it was the only thing that ever mattered. I don't want to go back to the way things were, he said. Hiding, calculating, pretending like that night was some kind of accident. It wasn't. No, it was a beginning. She looked up at him, eyes soft but clear. So what now? We climb into the mess together and hope we're strong enough to hold it. He shook his head. No, we build something better. Together. No lies. No secrets. Just one step at a time. Talia let out a laugh, not mocking, but real. Tired. Warm. You do realize people are going to keep talking. Let them, he said, stepping even closer. Let them wonder how I got so damn lucky. Her heart stuttered. She had been bracing for this moment for weeks, the aftermath, the fallout, the unspoken decision they'd always danced around. But now that it was here, it felt less like a decision and more like gravity. She reached up, touched the side of his face gently. I don't care about the rumors, or the press, or what the board thinks. What do you care about? You, she whispered. And then she kissed him. Not like the first time, impulsive, daring, electric. This kiss was something deeper. A homecoming. A quiet kind of knowing. His arms wrapped around her like they were always meant to. Her body folded into his like it had never forgotten. When they finally broke apart, breathless, forehead to forehead, he whispered, You realize this is going to change everything. She smiled against his mouth. It already did. Outside, the city moved on. Oblivious. Busy. Loud. But inside that office, inside that moment, time slowed. Because in a world of headlines and mergers and masks, two people had chosen to strip everything away. No more pretending. No more what-ifs. Just love, messy, powerful, earned. Together.